Biological Code Podcast, a podcast on Germanische Heilkunde. Today we're talking about hives and shingles. Mary is 55 years old, and I'd like to share a story from 25 years ago. At the time, she was just 30, recently separated from her husband, and knew absolutely nothing about Germanische Heilkunde. Back then, she desperately needed a change of scenery and financed her hiking vacation by working as a harvest helper in the Alps in Austria, living with a farming family in exchange for room and board. On the second floor of the farmhouse, there were 3 bedrooms, one for the farmer's son, one for the farmer's daughter, and one for the resident guest. It was a Friday evening when the young farmer came in after a long day in the fields baling hay. He was full of energy and delighted that the week's hard work was finally over. And because he had taken quite a liking to Mary, he snuck into her bed, lay down with her and pulled her into a sweaty embrace. Until then, Mary had maintained a very friendly relationship with him, but the sudden closeness with all the sweat made her recoil in disgust. In that moment, she desperately wanted to be separated from him. The situation was totally inappropriate and unacceptable to Mary. She pulled away sharply and gave him a proper telling off, not holding back verbally, and immediately left her room. Feeling dirty and defiled, she went to shower thoroughly and decided to lie down in the sister's empty, still unsoiled bed. Suddenly, a very painful stinging and itchy rash appeared on her skin in the form of small blisters around her hip and stomach, even extended down to her legs. As Mary was by that time unfamiliar with Germanische Heilkunde, she started to make all sorts of diagnoses. For instance, her first thought was that it might be a milk allergy, since she drank a liter of fresh cow's milk that day, straight from the cow. To relieve the itching, she began kneading her skin, but she couldn't sleep that night because the itching made it difficult. When the young farmer's mother saw Mary's condition the next morning, she insisted Mary see a doctor. After all, the farm had recently had an outbreak of scabies, and Mary's rash looked alarmingly similar. If it had been scabies, the exterminator would have to come again, and all the fuss would entail. The doctor diagnosed hives and prescribed medication, but at that time, Mary chose to take homeopathic globules instead. By the next day, the rash had completely cleared. The skin looked as if nothing had happened. Only the bruises from her kneading were still visible. Was it the homeopathic globules that had healed her skin? Today, after learning Germanische Heilkunde, Mary knows that the healing phase cannot be healed, neither with globules nor anything else. That's just logic. Of course, you can try to relieve the symptoms, but when the skin itches, it is important to understand it is because it's in healing. Which significant biological special program was Mary experiencing? It was certainly the outer skin program, as hives, itching and redness are all symptoms of it. The conflict content was separation, in this case, wanting to be separated from the young farmer who had embraced her with his sweaty body and clung to her in an unwanted, totally inappropriate closeness. It seems she also reacted with the dermis, indicating by stabbing pains and a belt-shaped rash following the skin dermatomes. Because dermatomes develop in segmented patterns during fetal growth, any attack on the tissue triggers a response within that specific segment. For further information, you can search for dermatomes on the internet. Mary definitely felt defiled by the incident, since she immediately showered and chose to instead lay down in a still unsoiled bed and not her own. This shows how one event can trigger multiple conflict perceptions, activating more than one significant biological special program. With both special programs, she was in the healing phase right after showering. The acute conflict activity was therefore already over. The next day, the young farmer certainly crossed her path again, and we might wonder, knowing that a similar incident could happen again, why then was Mary fully healed so quickly? Quite simply, after the doctor's visit, the young farmer took Mary aside and apologized for what took place that night. He told her that her rash was neither a milk allergy nor caused by mites, but had appeared because of his sweaty, inappropriate embrace. With this apology, the conflict was finally resolved and could no longer occur. Moreover, the young farmer had intuitively understood the connection with her rash correctly. Afterwards, the two went to the barn together, milked the cows, and enjoyed a glass of fresh milk as they had done before. But Mary had already resolved her conflict that night after showering. Even before the apology, she had gotten over it. The young farmer was 10 years younger than Mary, inexperienced and certainly attracted to her. She, instead, was an experienced woman, recently separated from her husband. For her, a young man full of vigor, coming straight in from the fields, sweaty and excited, was nothing to take too seriously. He merely surprised her with his innocent, though inappropriate approach. Actually, Mary felt sorry for him, because he wasn't finding it easy to find a woman, a future farmer's wife, for the inherited farm. And his recent actions had only to be embarrassing for him. With his apology, the matter was settled for Mary and would not happen again. She even continued to return to the farm at harvest time for another 2 or 3 years. Each time, the young farmer had a different girlfriend, but his mother tended to scare them all away. That, however, is another story. Learn the basics, the guiding principles of Germanische Heilkunde. They aren't difficult, and once you understand how wonderfully nature is arranged within our bodies, you will naturally lose your fear of illness. Learn to think biologically. The knowledge of Germanische Heilkunde belongs in every household. If you want to learn more about how to apply the 5 biological laws into your everyday life, you can find more information on our association's website, urkraftleben.at, or join our program at thebiologyproject.org. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Telegram, and Instagram. You can now find this podcast also on Apple Podcasts. Thank you for listening. Until next time.